Ian, good morning, brother. How are you?
Good morning, guys. I want to first apologize. I am not Zoom ready. I could not join you on Zoom.
You were born Zoom ready, Ian.
I was not, Maggie. I know that's
Is your hair
shocking.
disheveled right now, Ian?
Impossible.
It is. I have bedhead. I know a lot of people think I came out of the womb with perfect hair. I did not. It takes work. It takes effort. It takes maintenance. And I can't do any Zooms before 3 p.m. Eastern.
I believe the direct quote was, "I can't work like this." Or talk to my agent. No, we have your headshot up on our Twitch, and it looks like you're a cross between the valedictorian, the president of the frat, and just, I don't know if I can trust you, Ian, by this headshot.
All
Smile's
three.
a little too big.
I was all three. I was untrustworthy, president of the frat, and valedictorian. That's amazing, Maggie.
What a trifecta.
Ian, a lot to get into with you. Let's start with the Nets first, obviously, and then get your thoughts on some of the other series going on in the NBA. Barkley's been critical. We've seen super teams. Is there like a little bit of a fatigue here? I mean, it's impressive what they're doing with Milwaukee. I mean, it really is.
Yeah.
I mean, this series is just non-competitive through the first two games. Are we getting a little fatigue here with the super teams, even without Harden, what Durant and Kyrie have been able to do here in Brooklyn?
I really have to keep track of the narratives because they seem to be ever shifting.
They really do.
There was a narrative that I recall not so long ago that really depicted the idea that the three guys can't get along. One ball. How can it possibly work?
Yes.
So that was hot and heavy for a while. Then it was, playoffs are different. They can't play defense at the level required in the postseason. So that kind of took hold for a while. And now it's the end of the super teams, and it's ruining sports, and it's ruining the league. Yeah, come on, let's try to look at this from a realistic perspective. The way that Sean Marks set this up, this was not a snap your fingers and just go for it in the moment. The whole point of building the team and developing talent and creating a culture was to one day be in a position to welcome superstars into the fold, not because you just have salary cap room to do it, but because they want to come and be a part of it. And that's exactly what happened. The decision made to go out and get James Harden and strike while the iron was hot was based on the fact that they wanted Harden, and they also didn't want their main competition to get Harden, the Philadelphia 76ers in particular. So every move has been shrewd. Every move has been with thought behind it. And here we are now in the conference semifinals. They've rolled in the first two games. And the back page of some of the newspapers is this should be the end of super teams. It's been pretty comical, to be honest.
I agree with you. I think they've taken it to another level just because of how talented they all are. And right now, you just need two out of it's such a super team. You only need two out of the three to make Milwaukee one of the best teams in the East all season long look absolutely discombobulated on both sides of the floor. But I agree. I think any team would obviously switch places with them. I think the 76ers, the Miami Heat are kicking themselves that they didn't go all in for James Harden, obviously. And so I can't tell if it's a little jealousy and stuff like that too. And, because you're just like closer to the team, and I know it's tough in COVID times, it's not the same, but, Durant is endlessly fascinating to me. And he is right now, for my money, the best player left in the playoffs. He's excellent and showing everyone what he was like pre-Achilles, reminding us what he was like pre-Achilles. I wonder, though, what drives him? What's he searching for? Because sometimes he'll say it's titles, sometimes it's not. It's playing basketball at this high level. What's the sense you get from what Durant is motivated by?
I think it's a moving target with him. I think every day it's something else. I think Kevin, who is highly active in the social media scene and reading what's being said and using it as fuel in some way. So someone that's tweeting from an account that has 17 followers in the middle of North Dakota could have an effect on Kevin Durant in a positive way where he uses it in some manner.
Ian, how much time does Kevin Durant have in the day? He sees everything.
He sees everything. He is highly engaged. And he's not just a basketball player and just this is it 24/7. He does have a lot of business interests He and his partner, Rich Kleiman, his business partner, have done incredible things, and they keep growing and growing and growing. And the portfolio is prodigious and impressive. So it's not like he's in some room just leading a virtual life. He's actually leading a actual life beyond it. But he does consume a great deal. I do think that he finds motivation in interesting places, and he's used it in a way that's worked for him. Being away from the game, he is a baller. He does care about this a lot. His game face is real. You cannot crack that veneer. It's very tough to penetrate it when he's in that mode. And the skill level, as you've seen, not just in this postseason, but throughout the regular season when he was healthy, is just as good as it was, if not better in some ways, prior to the Achilles injury, because he's just so talented and smart. He knows how to make the right play and physically gifted. He can beat you in so many different ways. And it's been pretty dazzling to watch from a local play-by-play announcer's perspective when you get to see it on a game-in, game-out basis. Pretty amazing how it spreads throughout the team.
And this trio, when healthy, is it the greatest collection of three offensive players or three basketball players the NBA has ever seen?
It's up there. I know, look, we can go back and you could start talking about Elgin Baylor and Jerry West and Wilt Chamberlain and obviously what we saw with the Boston Celtics with Bird, McHale, and Parrish and the Lakers and the recent iteration of the Golden State Warriors. There's a lot of fun debates, but if we're just talking about individual talent, three individual players on the same team, still in the prime of their careers, not getting Karl Malone late or Gary Payton late or Charles Barkley late or Scottie Pippen late. I'm talking about in the prime, hovering around that age of 30 where they can still bring it. It's going to be tough to find a trio that will match up with the individual skills that these guys have. Now, you got to back it up with a championship because you don't enter that pantheon and that conversation unless you've got the hardware to prove it. And they know that. You know, that to me is probably the biggest point to make in this equation. They're not shying away from this. They never have shied away from it. They haven't put up built-in excuses along the way. And they recognize that they're going to be judged on the results. And that's a very modern view of this because of all of the attention that's thrust upon them. They're not downplaying it. They're not trying to go off into a corner and do it in anonymity. They know that everybody is watching. They know they've taken on this villainous role, and they're okay with it. They're not fighting it. They've embraced it in many ways.
Yeah, and it's of the now. You know, I was listening to a good podcast. Bill Simmons had Chuck Klosterman on, and they were talking about, you know, if Michael Jordan, people say like, oh, Jordan never would have done this, and, you know, we talked to Dominic. Like, you don't believe that Michael Jordan, if he was playing in this day and age, the most competitive person who has ever stepped foot onto any kind of playing surface, that he wouldn't be doing everything they possibly can to try to get a competitive advantage, including teaming up with other superstars. Like, it doesn't make sense. Of course he would be trying to get that advantage. I'm curious what you think if the Nets win this title, like how does that impact the legacy of these three? You know, Durant's already got 2 titles. Kyrie's got 1. Harden's the guy who's looking for 1.
Yep.
What does it do to their legacies, though?
I think it enhances it, believe it or not. I know the initial feeling will be that, this title will be viewed differently. I don't believe that. Over time, respect is gained when you've accomplished something so grand. And look, they have to cash in on this. We're talking still at the midway point, potentially, of the conference semifinals. There's a lot more basketball to be played. But to your point, Maggie, in regards to Michael Jordan, okay, let's use the Kevin Durant comparison, what Moose alluded to and what you alluded to, that he sees everything. If Michael Jordan played in this era, don't you think he would be highly aware of what's
extremely
being
online.
said.
He'd be ripping some 15-year-old in Utah on social media.
There's no doubt in my mind he would, because he would use any motivation. If an usher said something to him in an opposing arena, he would use that for the next 10 years and look at the guy after he scored in Minneapolis. So the idea that Michael Jordan would not have been sucked into this abyss is laughable. He would have, and he would have used it. It just so happens that Kevin Durant has had his prime years in this era, and in this era, it comes with the territory.
Everyone's LeBradford Smith.
That's
like it's just 100,000 guys like that online for Michael Jordan, right?
Ian Nash. He got, Kyrie didn't help out the cause, and I get what he was saying, but in terms of we don't really necessarily need a coach or coach and teach an offense, but I guess for him specifically, this team does win. Let's say this team does win a title. Do you think Nash is going to get the credit that he deserves as head coach of this team?
I think he will. I think in this league that is overlooked in the coaching part of it is how you manage personalities, and not just the X's and O's, which is, of course, very important, and schematically what you're going to do, what your philosophy is, how you want to play. But it's also how you navigate over the course of a season, especially when you have big-name personalities. Steve Nash was the perfect pick for that part of the terrain. He's never too high. He's never too low. His temperament is tailor-made for this. He has the personal accomplishments, so he backs up what he says based on what he did as a player, and then can relate for another myriad reasons because of what he had to do to make himself into a player. He wasn't the automatic superstar. He wasn't the physically gifted type. So you look at 4 through 12 on the roster, he has their respect because they understand and they can relate in some way. And that's the other part here. In addition to Steve Nash, Sean Marks has to get a lot of credit. I think it's gone under the radar. The fact that he did create depth, of course the big three is going to get the majority of the headlines. But to acquire Bruce Brown in the way that he did for John and Musa, to draft Nicholas Claxton, to acquire Jeff Green and sign him to a minimum deal, 1 year, $2.56 million, to develop Joe Harris over time, to pick up Mike James. That's where the real work is done for a GM.
Yeah, and Blake Griffin, I don't know if that was Durant or if that was Marks or whoever was really kind of spearheading that, but I think you're right. Sean Marks has done an excellent job. And Joe Harris and locking him up. I mean, Joe's been a huge part of these playoffs so far. Like, he had to trade away a lot of the core to get James Harden, and he created a new core, and created a new bench mob for himself. Ian Eagle is our guest, the one and only, the very best. So you're going to be calling Jazz Clippers Game 4 on Monday. How much is riding on, how much of Kawhi's future, Ian, do you think is riding on this series, or do you think he's re-signing in L.A., no questions asked?
Yeah, my sense is he would be re-signing in L.A. He lives in San Diego. His whole focus was to get back to the West Coast for his life and to get paid, which he did by the L.A. Clippers, and to create a situation where he could live his life in California. The idea that Kawhi would chase a ring somewhere else or go to Dallas or go to New York, I find unlikely. Now, who knows what's swimming around his head right now, but my sense of it is that it's pretty clear he's gonna hang in there with LA and try to get it done on that coast with that team. But things can change, and depending upon how they fare in this series and the direction that they're headed in, it might alter his whole thought process. But if you're asking me right now, will he be a part of this thing long term? My sense is he will.
It's interesting out west there, Ian, because you're going to be there at Clippers Jazz, right? Game 4. You look at the Suns, they've handled Denver first 2 games of that series pretty easily. and you look at Phoenix and Utah, those were the two teams nobody wanted to believe in, regardless of what they did in the regular season, right? It was always about, well, Kawhi and the Clippers, or maybe it was going to be Luka putting on a show with Dallas, or wait till you get LeBron and Anthony Davis back healthy, the Lakers,
right.
And we might end in the Western Conference Finals with the two teams that were clearly the two best teams in the Western Conference throughout the 72-game regular season.
Yeah, and the idea that this was wide open this year still didn't seem to compute with some people because it was default mode. No. LeBron will figure it out. It's
right.
LeBron. And we realized that, A, LeBron's gotten older, and B, that roster was flawed.
Yep.
Or the idea that, Phoenix, Utah, once they get into a pressure situation, they're not going to be able to handle it. They just don't have the experience level to do it. And I think that argument has gone out the window. Very impressed with the Jazz throughout the season. They've committed to a certain style. They shoot a ridiculous amount of threes. I did the game the other night. Guys, I don't think I've ever done a game where a team has missed 21 straight shots and still won the game and took a double-digit lead and held on. It was a very strange roller coaster affair. Thought the Clippers ran out of gas in the second half. They were coming off the grueling 7-game series, and they just didn't have enough. They had a terrible last possession. Tyronn Lue decided not to call a timeout. He's done that before. It's worked for them, and then there have been times where it hasn't worked for them, and this is one of those cases where it didn't. They just couldn't get organized. They couldn't get a clean shot off and a block by Gobert to end the game. If I'm the Clippers, I still walk away encouraged that in a game where Paul George couldn't put the ball in the ocean and Kawhi just didn't have one of his patented games, you still had a last possession with a chance to tie the game and send it to overtime in a raucous atmosphere. There were legitimately 18,000 people in that arena. It was such a bizarre moment for me. Like in the middle of the game, I started looking around and I thought to myself, because we were there, we were actually in attendance doing the game. And I thought to myself, I don't know if anybody could have predicted the bizarre nature of this season and how things were set up with the limitations. I was doing net games with highlights that would go down as all-time greats in franchise history, and there was nobody in the arena. Like calling the game and the crowd noise, you either would manipulate it because you needed it for TV purposes. And I'm thinking to myself, what would it feel like with 18,000 people here? And then, poof, you snap your fingers, there's 18,000 people in Salt Lake City. Like, how did we get here? It was pretty wild, and they had a legitimate impact.
Ian, you got to be as proud as anything. How is it you're doing a playoff game and your son is doing the radio side of things for the Clippers?
Who's this now?
I'm sorry, what? Never heard of him. Noah?
Yeah,
Never heard of him.
I didn't even see him. Was he there? He texted me,
guy
but I
kind of looks like you.
Right, he
Better
looks like
hair.
the guy that looks like your twin. You know that guy went to Syracuse. You know that guy.
I got a text from him during the game, like, "Where are you?" And I just figured I would return it after the play. No, it was great. It was very cool. We got to have dinner together. How about that? Just that concept of dining with a family member that you hadn't seen in many, many months, and then to be there at the game, it was beyond cool. He's having a ball. The team obviously has a chance to maybe do something special here. So when you're a part of that and you get to be on the air for that kind of run, it makes it even more special. But from a family standpoint, it was great. It was
now,
awesome.
Ian, here's the question: if it ends up being Clippers Nets in the NBA Finals, will there be an Eagle family bet or friendly wager on that series?
Oh, yeah. No, we've already talked about it. I computed how much I paid for college for 4 years. So basically...
So that's what you're betting?
Is that including food, everything, Ian?
Everything. No, I put it all on the table. I have a running list. It's on a grid. So we have that figure on the board. And if the Clippers win, he owes me nothing. But if the Nets win,
you owe me
$200,000.
He owes everything with interest.
Yeah, in installment packages. I'm not an ogre. Like, I won't say, hey, write one check. But we'll do it over like a 5-year period. I'll give him an extra year.
Yeah, there's going to be some interest, though. There's going to be some interest.
A little bit.
Longer it takes. Hey, Ian, final. Thanks for doing this, by the way. I know you're so engrossed now in basketball, but when are you going to start like your meetings up with Charles Davis again? Remember, you guys were doing the getting to know you Zooms.
I know.
Getting ready for football.
Yeah, we had one. Here's the thing: we don't spring for the extra Zoom, so
the time limit.
It has a 40-minute limit. So me, Charles, and Evan Washburn will do this Zoom, and we have a running text chain on who gets caught with their mouth open, making a point as the Zoom ends. And right now, Charles is leading the category. He's been cut off the most. No, we had one a couple of weeks ago. We're going to do another one coming up. Honestly, that was probably the best thing that we could have done leading into last season because we couldn't obviously meet up based on the restrictions, but it really did create an atmosphere that we felt comfortable when we did our first game. It was like, oh, we've talked to each other for many, many minutes, and we have gone into personal stuff, family stuff, football stuff. It really did help immensely.
Ian, last one, and that would be, you think Milwaukee, do they make this series interesting at all against Brooklyn?
Boy, I would have to think that this is the game, similar to the Boston series, where Boston took Game 3 and created a little bit of confidence, although the Celtics couldn't back it up. I would have to think this is the game where Milwaukee answers the bell, and they just have too much talent to not have a say in this series. But we know how it works in this sport. You can get on a roll where your confidence is through the roof, and the fact that they're doing it without Harden, without Green, and also, guys, just to make the point, because that really was the big question, they're getting it done defensively. What they've done against Giannis, what they've done against Chris Middleton, this was considered the Achilles heel, and they've delivered in that category. And if you're going to beat this team 4 times in a series, you're going to have to put up 120 points consistently, and the Bucks have not shown the ability to do that just yet.
And someone tell Budenholzer, don't play a zone against the Brooklyn Nets, will you? I mean, please.
That's not working. Not working.
What are we doing?
I mean, this is from the outside looking in. I can tell you, it's not. What seems to have worked.
Give Boeheim a call, Ian. If you're going to play a zone, give Boeheim a call.
I know. But the only thing that really seemed to work in Game 1, and they went away from it, was dumping the ball inside to Lopez and just letting him go to work. And then they shied away from it. We saw very little of that in Game 2. So I'd have to think that they're going to go back and try that again.
It's like when you try to be kind on the broadcast, like, interesting choice to go to a zone there. It's an interesting choice when you have some of the best shooters in the league.
50% from 3. Let's go to a zone defense.
Yeah, no, that's when, as a broadcaster, it's your tone more than your words that articulate the point that you're making. Yes.
Hey, Ian, we love you. And we appreciate the time. Thanks for giving us a great 20 minutes here, all right? And we'll be watching.
Yeah, the feeling's mutual, guys. Again, I'm sorry about the Zoom. I just...
Well, it's unforgivable, so,
I'll send you a picture.
Yes, make sure you get that product in the hair. Work through the locks, all right?
You did us a favor. So,